Morning, Unitic here. It is Monday morning, June the 8th, and I am hiking into Hawkins Hills State Park this morning. Seemed like a good time to do a video. Haven't done one in a while. Been just letting inspiration come to me, and haven't felt inspired for a particular topic. Although what I want to talk about this morning has been stewing in me for several days, and I knew I'd do a video on it at some point. Rained pretty good last night, stayed relatively dry. Kind of camped in a rainforest, so the humidity and moisture kind of gets into anything, regardless of whether the raindrops touch it. So I'm a little bit damp. Got about 5.5 miles to get to the state park lodge office, where my buddy Drew has sent me a new pair of shoes. Are supposed to arrive by 3 o'clock today, UPS, because I've about worn the pair I've got out. Got more than 600 miles on them. And but it looks like we got a little break in the weather. I thought I'd do a video about individual power. I think that question comes to all of us that are interested in improving this world, this reality that we seem to exist within, is how can one person make a difference? I know Drew and I have talked a lot about this on the phone, trying to buck each other up, because many times out here I feel like, you know, what's the use? How can I really do anything that impacts the way the world works? To use a phrase my friend Alan Weisbecker writes about. Well, what came to me is the writings of a guy named Dr. David Hawkins, that some people have heard me talk about before, particularly a book he wrote called Power versus Force. David Hawkins was an eminently successful psychologist, huge practice in New York City, on the staff of Columbia University, running research projects around the world. And over the course of his life, once as a young child and once late in life, he had a couple of pretty dramatic near-death experiences. And as seems to be the case with so many of those you hear about, they were life-altering. The second one, in both cases, he describes the classic choice when he was out of body about whether to come back into human form, into that physical body, or whether to enjoy the freedom that he and so many others describe in that near-death realm, that out-of-body, that expansive point where you're not confined to this physical form. And as a child, he came back into his body because he describes, because of the knowing of the pain that his father particularly would go through if he passed on. I think he was only about 10, 11 years old. And late in life, when he had a health crisis and almost died, he described choosing to come back because at that point he had acquired the language of science, and with the understanding of the mysterious, the non-physical world that he got through these experiences, he felt like he was perhaps uniquely prepared to come back into this world and try to use that language of science to describe that greater mystery. So he wrote a book called Power versus Force. And over the course of many, many, many years of research using kinesiology, muscle testing, a diagnostic tool that even mainstream medicine uses, he used it to develop what he called a scale of consciousness, which basically allowed a physical test that went beyond the rational thinking mind. And he did these tests all over the world in countries speaking many, many different languages, and consistently got consistent results. He developed a scale of consciousness that goes from 0 to 1,000, and it's kind of like a Richter scale. It's not linear, it's exponential. As you go up that scale of consciousness, the expansion is dramatic, not just incremental. And on that scale of consciousness is a level called 500. The level of 500 is what he calls the level of love, where your awareness, your self-expression reaches a level that goes so far beyond, on a moment-by-moment basis, the practical nature of the everyday world, all the fears and anxieties that occupy so much of our day-to-day existence. The level of love is that level of connection, the level of feeling that you are a part of everything else and everyone else. And people that experience that level don't necessarily stay there 24/7, but many of us have had those momentary experiences. Sometimes it's in romantic love, sometimes it's in the love of a parent to a child, many times it's with an animal. I feel this often with my dog, where you just kind of transcend the fear. Well, what he describes is the opposite of that is the lower levels, particularly the levels below 200. 200 is a benchmark he describes where you first reach some self-awareness, some level of consciousness beyond your physical needs. Below the level of 200 are levels like shame and guilt, two of the most destructive emotions and levels of consciousness. Mass murderers, totalitarian dictators, you know, the really, really negative people in the world operate in those levels of guilt and shame. And so much of the negativity in our world comes from those levels. Until someone transcends that level of 200 and actually starts to experience themselves beyond just their physical self, they literally don't speak the same language that someone like you and I might. They won't understand. And this is not an insult. It's just a statement of fact that they won't understand the conversations you and I might have about love and higher meaning, expansive thinking, being more than just your physical self. So anyway, through his research, and I highly recommend his book, Power versus Force. It's a commitment to read it. It's written in the language of science, but it's also written in the language of spirituality, because they really aren't two separate languages. They are joined at the hip. Great philosophers and great quantum physicists are really one and the same. So he describes that one person vibrating intentionally and consistently, existing at that level of 500, can transmute, can alter the negative energy, the collective negative energy. 750,000 people vibrating below the level of 200. And he's come to that conclusion through literally thousands of kinesiological tests with subjects all over the world who had no conscious awareness of what they were being tested for using kinesiology. And you can see demonstrations of this on YouTube. So one person really can change the world. Two people coming together and intentionally trying to hold that space of that level of love and the levels above it. You know, he refers to the levels on up to 1,000. I think above 700, he calls it the level of the avatar. And Jesus, Buddha, folks like that would be the benchmark, the 1,000 level beings that transcended their physical form and actually experienced who they truly are, their greater self, their entire self, their integrated self. This and greater things ye shall do. And they tried to be way showers to point the way that you can do this too. So focusing your attention on trying to embody that is a powerful, powerful practice. And maybe in later videos we'll talk about that, but I just wanted to share that with you today. Highly recommend David Hawkins' work. A lot of YouTube videos about him that you can find easily. Dr. David Hawkins has passed away a few years ago. Power versus Force and many other books. So for today, you are making a difference, even if it's just to exchange a smile with a stranger in the grocery store. You lift other people up. So that's what I got for today. We'll talk more later. Unitic out.